So we are now jumping into leading with agility. We're going to cover some interesting stuff here. A lot of leadership theory, business agility. So stick with me. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. This isn't just your traditional Agile presentation here. So that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we talk about. You're not going to hear me talk about story points. You're not going to hear me talk about velocity. You're not going to hear me talk much about iterative work structures and detail, but we are talking about Agile. So let's jump into this. Hooray, good for you. I love that. So when you're leading with agility, folks miss out on one big thing, themselves. When you look at the certification that ICAgile is bringing out, leading with agility, which is I tie in some of the learning objectives into this presentation, it talks about self-leadership. I talk a lot in other presentations about leadership changing from a noun to a verb. And in order for that to happen, we have to have a belief in that. We have to believe and have to support the values of what it means to lead first and foremost with yourself, and then carry that through to the teams, the department, and the organization that you work within. And I take it a lot back to cognitive behavioral therapy when you hear me speak, but CBT really digs into this idea of beliefs and values of being a cornerstone of who you are that help drive what you do. And what you do are your thoughts, your feelings, and then those thoughts and feelings activate your behaviors and actions. So as you listen to this presentation, you got to start processing whether you believe that this way of working is possible, that it can be done, and it's something that you can do. And as you build that belief in, your actions and behaviors will begin to drive forward because you're going to be thinking about it more. And part of Agile is, we talk about this thing, continuous learning, but that's what it's about. You're constantly evolving and adjusting, but not at that belief level. It's at the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors and actions. So think about that as it relates to you. Where are your beliefs at with regard to leadership structures right now? How does it affect your thoughts and feelings? And then ultimately, can you adjust your behaviors and actions to match this going based on your beliefs? So it starts with the heart and all else comes from there. And it's part of what's missing a lot in Agile leading and agility presentations is going back to the fact of it's the individual, each individual bringing their ability to lead into the team environment. So crazy slide here, but I love this slide. And look at some of these. This is the organization of the future. Agile as a way of working, leading with agility, drives the principles of a future organization. What are some of the things that you agree with here? Remember, I love commentary. I love feedback. I love thoughts. Don't hesitate to throw your thoughts and ideas in the chat. But what areas here do you agree with that you say, oh, that's definitely part of the organization for the future? What don't you agree with? What do you think, hey, that's not even possible yet? And when I looked through this, I really came up with 5. Number 6, okay, you agree with number 6, adapts to change faster. Great. I completely hear you on that one. Another 6, that's pretty cool. And then I'll keep seeing these, agree it. So the VUCA aspect, absolutely. I'm glad, Melissa, you brought up VUCA before me, because I think some people, get sick and tired of me talking about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Curious about flatter structures. And then, Anthony, that's a really good thing, because Agile is asking for democratizing decision-making so that the team, the individuals itself, are deciding on how to act and react. The more you democratize decision-making, the flatter an organization gets, because really there's self-leadership. And in self-leadership, a team can be a very large team, could have one person leading it because the team itself is self-managing. So we want to be able to flatten the decision-making process. Any one of these that people are uncomfortable with? So when I break it down to small. Absolutely. Small. I say break it down to small. That's wild because most of you work for big companies. The thing is, can you get small where it matters? Because small then allows for being nimble. And IIBA talks about a lot about this word nimble. You can also relate it to being adaptive. Change handling. Look at the change handling is very big in all of these things. The idea that things are available, the cloud aspect, democratization of learning, things are available. It's not a closed system, it's an open system. And then finally, diverse. And when you hear me present, I talk a lot about cognitive diversity. Identity diversity is very important, but cognitive diversity drives bringing in different heuristic patterns to help organizations struggle with help organizations to solve problems they're struggling with. So it's just a little bit of a mindset here around, do these principles make sense? Where are we at? Where am I at in my belief system associated with some of these principles? Now, let's look at reinventing the organization. How many of you lived in the red circle before? A fear-driven culture. A culture driven in the red zone of get something done, don't think about anything else, don't ask questions, don't bring in different ideas, drive forward or you're going to be fired. Some of you might feel like you're operating that way right now. And that fear, power, fear, and chaos is still there. As we break it up, a lot of times I actually liked the idea of more of a governance structure. I used to talk about that a lot. The philosopher king mindset, which is a benevolent philosopher king, like Aristotle talked about, where they have command and control and everything works out because you can trust them. But as we know, that's not, power corrupts, and that's not natural. We have the more pure capitalistic standpoint. And what's missing, and what's the issues there? The issues become, can you preserve? Is there value in taking the time to actually be able to be resilient and to persevere? A lot of times that's where the capitalist structure breaks down, is the idea that you have to pivot, and you have to give, you have to lose. And that system's not very comfortable with loss. Almost like the phoenix, a lot of times organizations have to lose, then be rebuilt. And that's tough to do in a competitive, profit, more capitalistic mindset. All of us Agilists will get really excited about that zone with Ben and Jerry's and the like, this idea of delighting customers, sharing values. But what's missing there? What's missing in that one? What does that top level give us? At the end of the day, the missing link for me is, this idea of resilience. Anti-fragile organizations. It's like we operate to operate. We don't operate because we are this great company that does this. We operate because we're here to do what's necessary to keep moving forward. Soft ed, I'm here to do what's necessary to keep moving forward. That's the adage I've had as a training professional for the last 30 years, because I only survive and change. And so I have to have that idea of let instructors make decisions in the classrooms they're working on, that we're about helping people continuously at that higher purpose. It's not just about this, hey, sell you a box. It's about selling you and how you're going to grow. And we can't be fragile. We get broken down and redone lots of times. So I think when you get to that higher level of reinventing an organization, what people want to start saying is we operate. We operate on values and principles, but what we do is going to change and change constantly. to the point where we can operate with just a few fundamental rules, and these decentralized agents can go off and just work. Now, a lot of you are probably saying this is completely impossible, Dave. Come on, Dave. Get out of the crazy utopian zone that you're in right now. True. What I'm asking is, leading with agility starts with each person. Can you begin to embrace? Can you begin to espouse some of this thought process and anti-fragility? It means that you know that you can be a casualty, that at some point in time, what you do is going to become less valued. And so you're prepared to then make that pivot because you're not fragile. You're not going to crack at the first wind that blows in your direction, or you're not going to fall over with the first wind that blows in your direction. It's kind of what I want you thinking about with this concept. Again, thoughts, comments, additional shares, please don't hesitate. So when you're thinking about leading with agility, you have to drive with the first and foremost this concept of business agility. And so I see business agility as a way of working for the operation of a company in totality, like the whole culture, the whole mindset, as it relates to whether you're marketing, whether you're in sales, whether you're in finance, whether you're in IT. You bring in the business agility mindset as a framework, as a way of operating. And the Business Agility Institute is one that you don't get many people talking about. But when you're talking about leading with agility, you have to look and dig into what the Business Agility Institute is talking about. It's not just a fly-by-night organization. It's been around now for 15 plus years. And you can start seeing the 5 high level, primary domains and all of your emergent capabilities. When I look at some of these emergent capabilities, this idea of psychological safety pops up in engaged cultures. You're going to always see that pop up as it relates to leading with agility. You could do a whole session on that. If you haven't even gotten into that topic of psychological safety, if you're interested in leading with agility, it's an area you have to figure out. Because ultimately it goes back to my whole premises presentation. Leading with agility starts with you. Psychological safety starts with you, not with the organization. So when you look at, we'll dig into these other circles here in the next slide, but you can kind of get a snapshot of these 18 different capabilities. Maybe we'll talk into them about behaviors. So let's look at this in more detail. And I think my more detailed slide was checked out. So let me dig into it a bit more here. So people first leadership. You're going to hear about servant leadership and host leadership when I go forward. So really looking in reverse. It's not about me telling you what to do. It's about me supporting you so you can get things done. Flattening allows people to run. We want to flatten organizations so people can run faster, so they can make decisions. Like I work for a New Zealand-based company. I'm minus 16 hours away from them. I have to run. I can't wait. If they don't operate people first, there's no way this operation works, because it's never going to adjust. The customer centricity. Do we understand and teach people exactly what a customer is, what a customer versus a stakeholder is? What does that mean? And then being able to dig into that aspect to support your customers, whether they're internal or they're external. As I used to say in this business, we have a lot of contract trainers. So they are my customers. They're not just part of the business. They are the customers of SoftEd. I have to treat them as customers, with giving them senses of purpose, respect, fiercely championing them as thought leaders, to make sure to embrace them in order so they then can touch the external customers. Engage cultures. So going back to that idea of safety and learning. Safety and learning. The value-based deliveries, I could talk all day long about that. But I would tell you that people don't understand value. So if you're going to dig into that area of value, they can engage cultures. It's about psychological safety. Responsible customer centricity is about knowing what the customer versus the stakeholder. Leadership first is, okay, can I understand servant and host leadership? And finally, those flexible operations, even though I said I wasn't going to talk about it, this is where your iterative work happens. This is where you look for a balance between right and moving forward, good and moving forward, done and moving forward, and being able to seamlessly pivot between each of your iterations. So this is the circle. This is the circle of business agility. Now you're going to also start hearing some other topics in and around the idea of agile leadership. And these are structures. You got the no projects versus project structures. I don't know how many of you have run into that. And you can start seeing the idea of output. Everything that ties back to a value stream. Now you want to create more stable teams with more control of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And then ultimately business outcome ownership. I own what this outcome is. So you have the no project versus project world as a change in the way we look at the world, especially in the SDLC environments, where everything we have is a project with a life cycle. We got to look at how that outcome is affected during the life that it has. We want data. We want to know how to pivot as it relates to the end user. Look at your hierarchy. So the structure of hierarchy is basically intermingling your influencers, your board of directors, your people in a position of power within each of the teams. So there's a very flattened scenario where the teams, and then it's the leadership. Teams, then there's the leadership, and nothing in between. You have the BOSA model, beyond budgeting, the open space concept, the sociocracy concept, and of course, Agile. And, you know, when you look at sociocracy, there's where your safety comes to play. And then as you start looking at a very smooth operational model is, I'm doing the work. If it's a sensitive topic, is it more of a tactical issue, go there, keep doing the work. Is it more of a strategic governance issue? You got to go there, then keep doing the work. You know, I'm doing the work, or else I have something that's sensitive. Registering a tactical sensitivity, strategic sensitivity, and go in and keep operating. But these are different types of structures and patterns that can be moved in and out from a work leading with agility perspective. But each one of them goes back to a lot of these foundational elements associated with business agility. You can map those right back and put those into these structures. So, not much comments. Again, thoughts, comments, ideas, don't hesitate to share. If you're leading with agility, most people dive into the book Drive. I just gave the book Drive to a young gentleman who graduated from Kansas here recently, going into work as for New York Life, and really helped him kind of talk through what's driving his clients, not just himself. But do you know where you're at on this scale? Are you just at that biological motivation? Are we just at, or are you moved to the intrinsic motivation? Most of us are probably in that extrinsic motivation. And then can you see yourself moving into an intrinsic motivation? Where are you at here? We got to put these things together. We have to survive. All right, we need food, clothing, shelter. It's mandatory. Our brains demand it. When you get into leading with agility, and I haven't talked about this yet, but you're going to get into the fact that I'm going to do it in the next slide. This is about you. As I keep saying, it gets deeper into the you aspect. So where are you as it relates to this motivational mindset? Are you still leading with the stick and carrot? I want some rewards. I got to avoid punishment. I want my rewards. I want to avoid punishment. Certainly, when I'm here at SoftEd, I want to drive for my bonus. I want to make my revenue numbers. I want to manage my objective numbers, and I want to drive for a return with a bonus, right? But I'm here also because I love training. I love being able to help and support people, watching people grow. I have definitely a lot of autonomy. I can make a lot of decisions on my own based on where the current condition's going. And I came back to training after I left because I wanted to stick in something I mastered. I continued to grow in the idea of marketing and selling and product management of training. So I come in, it's not just, I got to make this bonus, I got to do my job to keep my job. I love it. I'm motivated by the fact that I can be autonomous. I can make decisions, that I am doing something for a purpose to help others. So Anthony asks, are there instances where you have to be in those motivational spaces? I think about AI opening up space to allow people to live. Yeah, so ultimately where we want to get to is look at that circle. You want to be in that circle. You want to have that. These are not Venn diagram, it's concentric. I forgot what the heck it's called. My brain's right here, but yeah, I think it might be the Venn diagram side of it. Where are you in putting these together? So yes, the more we can get away from doing into thinking, Anthony, and behavioral thinking and working and collaborating with others, the more powerful our decision-making will be. The more engrossed and be able to dig deeper and critically think about the problems we're trying to solve. AI becomes a tool to help you get more information, to have more time to think, to be able to do work that might take 4 hours and do it in 2 hours. You still have to make those decisions. And I'd rather people make decisions with intrinsic motivation, not just extrinsic motivation. That's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to a motivation where you're driving it because you believe, you're passionate, you're excited. There is a foundation of money. There's always going to be a foundation. We'll get into that. But ultimately, you are making decisions based on that passion, that love, that purpose, and that experience. And you want to keep growing that experience. So Rebecca said, since having kids, I can no longer work outside of normal business hours. So I have to work hard to do more of what I truly enjoy at work and be less resentful about the work. I think that naturally that helps. Here's Rebecca, that's lean. That's what I'm trying. My purpose has been to help people start thinking more lean. You have to look at your work. You have to know what the outcomes of your work are, that provides value. And then you operate in that. And then you don't worry about the other stuff. If you have time to do it, you do. If you don't, you don't. More lean is going to give you more intrinsic motivation, Rebecca, just like you're talking about. But here's again, it starts with you. You're not going to teach this whole organization in one training class this. Each individual has to begin to espouse these scenarios and understand it and believe it so they can start adjusting their behaviors accordingly. And once that happens, and stories can be told, corporate mythology can be built around the concept of intrinsic motivation. So we're getting deeper into this, but what we want to say here is we're all knowledge workers. So it's part of leading with agility. First off, you have to know what a knowledge worker is. Knowledge workers can work 24 hours, 7 days a week, nonstop. There's always something a knowledge worker can do. Knowledge workers are the basis for the creativity and problem solving that drives productivity and drives revenue and profit for organizations these days. The thing is, since you can work 24/7, you have to figure out and tie back into what does make knowledge workers truly productive. So they can feel that within their work time, they are productive. And if they decide to do other things outside their work time, that's their choice. So that foundation there is that decent salary. got it, the foundation, we have to pay, because first off, motivation is the fact that you have to survive, right? Have to have a living wage, or wage that ties into the experience, the skills. But now look at the difference. We have to really push away from structured mindsets into open mindsets. You know, it's funny because our educational system does not drive this. Our educational system teaches knowledge workers to get more and more myopic in their learning, tighter and tighter and tighter. What we're looking at for knowledge workers to become more and more open so that they can engage and work with others. It's not that the knowledge piece of what you do isn't important. The thing you got to look at is, but the other thing you got to think about here when you're leading with agility is, so it's how you're getting things done that's more important, and how you can do that in a lean way to allow for more thinking about what you're going to get done next. You see, we talk about getting away from the coercive, the fear structures, trying to move into the anti-fragile organizations where I'm operating, adjusting, pivoting, know my expertise is going to erode, bring up and build up and be able to, through continuous learning, build a new expertise and not feel like that I'm not going to be valued because that expertise has eroded. It's a big issue. And you're going to see this more and more in companies that aren't led in the agile way, with a lot of folks with the expert power base bullying, getting frustrated, causing challenges within the organization because their power base erodes so rapidly, and they have no way to, they feel too stuck in a box to try to change to a new power base, or try to change to a new expertise, which potentially could give them a new power base. The problem is that power base erodes. The power base of curiosity and learning is going to replace the expert power base. And that ties back to what matters for knowledge workers. And if you have some interest, and you like structure, you do like, this idea of supervision, there are areas to work within that still have that. But with the rapid pace of change that continues to happen, you're going to find less and less opportunities for things like supervised. You have an expertise, you're supervised, you get it done. You have clear rules, those things happen. You know exactly what you have to do. You have an inkling that, okay, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to have a job. That motivates me to keep going. Those opportunities become less and less because they're going to get disrupted more and more. And that's tough because we're used to working in a state of learned helplessness, where we like to give up our responsibilities to let somebody else be responsible for our outputs. This concept and slide really revolves around the white side, second bullet point, and that's autonomy. Are you ready, and can you accept autonomy in what you're doing, and the responsibility and the risk that comes from that? To be a successful organization in VUCA, like Rebecca was talking about, this autonomy is going to become more and more important, because it's almost like it's the energy source for all the other things we talk about. But it starts with each individual wanting to gain back responsibility and having the psychological safety to accept that responsibility. And as we start getting into teaming, teams are just lots of individuals put together to form a lattice of leadership. The team can make decisions, but each individual is participating in that and making decisions at their work. So you can't go into a highly functional team in a rapidly changing environment without autonomy, because that team will not be able to support you. So Anthony Cox, could you consider this as do the things on the left at the start in a way that sets up all the things in the right, except the fear part, or can you start on the right all the time? My thought is you start in the middle. As you start looking at knowledge workers, pay is important. So you want to pay the right wage. From there, you immediately want to move towards the right. And we want to look at hiring people who show you the behavioral patterns to move to the right fluidly. You want to move to something called behavioral interviewing, looking at behaviors and actions, not just expertise and experience, because you can see in those behaviors how that person can move into that area. Because one of my concerns in all this, as we get deeper into the presentation, is, can this be trained? Can someone get support to learn how to operate autonomously, to take on that concept of responsibility, to lead at that place of work? Because that's not the basis of our traditional cycles of working. It's not the basis of how we operate. So think about that for a bit. Do you think, as we dig into this, that some of these areas are trainable? Especially because a lot of my presentations in other areas, I talk about this is not natural. Being a knowledge worker does not come naturally to how the human brain has evolved. It has to be pushed into that appropriately. That's why we have so many struggles in complicated and complex environments. Has to deal with our ability to master ourselves as a work machine, so we know when we're finding conflicting scenarios. Because push comes to shove, our brain wants to push us into the left side. Our brain likes structure. Our brain likes consistency. Our brain hates change. And your brain always operating on efficiency and survival. So it doesn't want to learn too much because it's too much energy and effort. And it wants to keep you in a box. And if it was up to it, it put you as a bubble person in your house with a big bubble around you. That's the best opportunity to survive. That is the kiss of death in the way work systems and work environments are going, the way customers' needs are changing and adjusting. So going back to the you in all this, ultimately, we have to really dig into this mindset piece, because beliefs and values are the cornerstone of making these things happen. So when you wake up in the morning, where are you at? Are you ready to see yourself and others grow? Do you believe that your organization can grow? And then look at this next one. I talk a lot about fixed versus growth mindset. Look about this benefit mindset. Can we be a part of it? We're just operating for the well-being of all of us around. Focus on who we are being and why we do what we do. And being a benefit by being transformational. It's going to get to the point that each day we're going to have to change what we do and how we're doing it. Maybe not each day, but it's going to be rapid. So being able to walk in with that mindset of transformation is a key, another key underpinning of leading with agility. So it becomes becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. Can you be comfortable being uncomfortable? And helping support others doing that. So again, going back to this, is this trainable? Or is this something that with persistent support and guidance can be built? So as you get into leading with agility, we want to look at teaming. We have these different levels of teaming. You know, an individual is their own little team. You have all the way up to that resilient learning team, constantly working, adapting, and adjusting. So we realize that Agile working in agile environments, we're going to be leading at the locus of our work, but we're going to be doing so within a team structure where each team member is leading at the locus of their work. And this is where the understanding of human operation matters the most. Because when you're getting into learning resilient teams, what you're going to have, you should have a very cognitively diverse team. Members who think differently based on different perspectives, different backgrounds, different philosophies. And that team has to be able to support those different perspectives, those conflicting ideas, and be able to continue to operate and not be stagnated by that. Right now, culturally speaking, we do this very poorly. So most high performance teams become very cognitively non-diverse. They start working in a structured mindset and performing based on the processes and procedures that they've done, and they start becoming more of an automated system. And the automated system becomes almost converts into an expert power base that erodes quickly if it doesn't keep learning. So think about that. Where we're getting at is that step. We love high performance teams because they allow for productivity and they allow for efficiency, absolutely, but they aren't necessarily resilient. They aren't necessarily anti-fragile. That's taking that next step means, can that team fight amongst each other, debate amongst each other, adjust and pivot, and not get the friction of angst and conflict and frustration? Because when you're all listening to this presentation, you are feeling that. You know about the angst, the frustration, the aggravation that happens because, there's conflict mostly centered around different personalities in the operating function. And instead of being able to try to find a way to embrace that, you are led in a way to just try to put that in a box and keep moving forward. So that resiliency, part of leading with agility, goes to you. Your ability to have your ability to have psychological safety, your ability to understand the responsibility of autonomy, and your ability to pivot and adjust and change. Yeah, so Anthony talks about facing difficult things without skirting the issues. That's it. Here's the thing. You want to debate. The thing that some people get frustrated about is too much debate, not enough action. High performance teams, more of that structured bureaucracy that I talked about in the previous slide, can seem very efficient. And I'm not debating that it isn't very efficient. It is. It could be significantly more efficient than the resilient leader team, but what the resilient learning team. But which one gets you to the other side in chaos and constant change? So what we want to be looking at are teams that self-organize. And these teams that self-organize, they can go through different levels of maturation. From leader-led, so that there's a team that functions. You might have some elements of autonomy in the individuals in the team, but ultimately the team takes on what the management is looking for, all the way up to this idea of self-governing teams. Could you see a scenario where the sales team governs and manages itself, adjusting territories, bringing in new sales professionals, adjusting compensation plans accordingly based on strategic direction of the executive level? Sounds crazy, but if that was done, it could be very, very effective to be able to adjust and pivot accordingly. But then folks in that system have to come in with a intrinsic motivation, not just an extrinsic motivation. And what do we tell about salespeople? They're all driven, they're coin operated. That's part of the problem with transformation within organizations and external customer side is, since you're coin operated, you want a fixed process, a fixed sales process. But when you're trying to introduce a disruptive product, your sales process fails miserably with that, because they don't have that designing or the self-governing team that can be resilient and search and look for this new sales process to sell that disruptive product. So this matrix again ties back to the ability of each individual to take ownership of the elements of leadership that is necessary, leadership being a verb, to participate in these teams. That, to me, has always been the missing link in Agile, especially on the IT side. The team operates, but what do we do in looking at each individual within that team? How are they with regard to their self-leadership, their ability to embrace the responsibilities necessary to participate, or are they just getting caught in the wave of the team? So going back to handling human interaction, what we want to start looking for are these cross-functional teams where people can be moved in and out where necessary from their different departments. Maybe team A is part of one operation, team B is part of another operation, team C is part of another operation. They're all stakeholders within a given system build, and you can put them into different teams so they can share their insights and their ideas based on what is affecting them. So they can bring in more knowledge, more information, and different perspectives. What you want to do with cross-functional teams is just that. You want to bring in different ideas and different perspectives so that you can start seeing how you can operate differently as it relates to what you're trying to get done. So Mark says, this sounds great for the ideal person. I think you're starting to, Mark, I think you're starting to feel some of the stuff I'm talking about. But we are working with humans that have all some level of pride, which feels like I could get in the way of self-governing teams. Yeah, Mark, this is the skinny. We are not built to handle this type of work structure, but we're going to be forced to have to work this way to stay competitive, to stay valuable. And the sense of pride, Mark, I think comes from the individual's ability to pivot and adjust, the pride in being able to handle being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And then that you will be able to stay valuable and be able to increase your earning potential based on your staying valuable during those constant ebbs and flows. Pride usually happens from a mastery of a specific area and the building of an expertise. That pride has to pivot and adjust to mastering the ability to constantly change, mastering the ability of intellectual curiosity, and then increasing your value as you're able to pivot and adjust and change as the marketplace pivots, adjusts, and change. That's the hard thing. But if that pie can pivot that way, then the systems can start working. So Anthony says, I believe that's why management needs to focus on growing people, enabling teams. Yes. So the pivoting starts here. The knowledge workers need more time to think and to think deeply, to critically think, to debate. So we want as much automation. That's why AI could be such a powerful tool. We want as much automation in the ultimate production side so we can drive what's being produced. That's knowledge work. Leadership needs to be supportive to help each of those individuals grow by being able to understand each individual where they fit in the matrix of the scenarios we're talking about now, and some of the critical behaviors that tie into the business agility piece and the business, and when we get into this, the adaptive leadership piece. And I'm looking at time, we're getting a little tight here, but keep asking your questions. So ultimately, this resilience goes back to the fact that teams don't work in a linear way. Teams adjust. Motivations ebb and flow. Activity ebbs and flows. In some cases, you're adding and subtracting team members. ultimately, you want to go through your storming, forming, norming, and performing, which is another teaming model, to ultimately get to that performance level. But that performance level, again, will constantly be adjusted. It constantly has to be rethought about, because that performance level is based on the status quo. You've gotten to the point where you have a status quo. It's in that status quo that you become less resilient. So how do you do that? How do you take it to that next pop? And how does that team perform and operate given the fact they got to get ready for that next pop? So what I want to get out with the teaming slides is none of this teaming can work at any level of efficiency without the underlying skills of each individual's ability to lead with agility and understand their responsibilities within that system and take those responsibilities as it relates to the operation of the team at that individual level. And that's where I think a lot of failures happen. We're using some of the iterative work structures. We're talking about self-organization. We're trying to define value, but the conflicts and the frustrations and the inefficiencies happen at the team level because the individuals have not been properly prepared, taught, supported in their pathway towards agility as an individual. And so when we get into that, what we see as we look at this idea of the continuum of leadership, in the complexity that we face now, leadership constantly is thinking about transformation, constantly thinking about this mass personalization, each person in the operation, and then how they adjust and pivot accordingly. And we can innovate, okay, but we can innovate only on certain cycles. We have to start tightening up those cycles, and then we have to look at what it means to be transformational to that individual level. So leadership starts with the concept of a servant mindset. And also, first and foremost, you have these different leadership styles to be looking at. Autocratic, bureaucratic, coaching, democratic, oh my gosh, democratic, laissez-faire. You see these things. You can actually take these elements and go back to that 5-circle diagram and lay them out and where they fit. What we're going to focus on is the servant and the host leadership style. So when you're leading with agility, where are you at the servant as a leader and where you're at with the host? Servant first, people first. I mean, servant first, leader first. There's the different poles. And like we talked about with human nature, in between those is an infinite variety of things that can happen. This is not happening instantaneously, servant leadership. But when you're trying to get there, what you're trying to get is the idea that we want to support and help. Support and help. Support and help. To serve the customers, to serve the system first and foremost. And that is extremely hard because we don't see that in our ways that we've been taught leading to a productive outcome for ourselves. We feel in the servant leadership mindset that we're going to be left behind, that someone's going to take credit for what we do, that we're not going to be able to put ourselves in the right position. And this is where that system and this construct falls apart unless we begin to teach why there's a positive impact of being a servant and serving. And the servant and serving's powerful impact is about getting things done. The more you can get things done, the more effectively you get those things done to have outcomes that provide value is when you'll start seeing more and more people embrace the servant side of leadership and agility. And so you have these traits. Again, a lot of these traits are hard to train. It almost comes with constant repetitive experience. So like we say, this transformation is a transformation of the mindset. As you transfer the mindset, then these traits become more valuable than the traits that we have seen in other leadership systems. This is the problem. It's almost, as I talk to some people about this concept of the age of Aquarius, that in order to do these agile things and leading in this agile way, we have to have some type of mental transformation. You probably think I'm crazy, but when you look at it, there's something to be said there, and that's where Mark talks about. There has to be a mental transformation tied to pride. Where do you put yourself? Where do you get your sense of pride and accomplishment now in this structure versus what we were taught to get our sense of pride and accomplishment from? Now, I like host-centered leadership more because there is responsibility at the host level. Leaders have responsibility. They keep the flow. A host keeps the flow of everything going, brings in the right people, creates the right space, knows when to pull people together, knows when to pull people apart, to initiate those conversations. So we should more be looking to be hosts in our leadership styles, to collaborate, to bring the right people in a given situation, to support people given their current situation, to be mindful of what's going on around us. And it all wraps up into me a box of adaptive leadership. Leading with agility ties into becoming adaptive in your leadership styles. Now, there's a book called The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. Heifetz and Linsky wrote this book. And what adaptive leaders espouse is the status quo is the invisible killer. I know the essential versus the expendable. And I'm going to teach people how to be lean so that they can look to constantly pivot and adjust. Being lean to pivot and adjust, tie back to maximizing valuable output. And it starts with us, how we look at ourselves there. Like in my day, how am I an adaptive leader in my day? How do I reduce the burden work? How do I focus on the value work? Where do I get my learning? How do I process that learning? And we're not going to dig too deep now into these competencies, but as you look at leading with agility, understanding adaptive leadership, the skill sets that underlie adaptive leadership is one of the best places to start at the individual level. You can teach system thinking. You can teach people, the understanding of critical thinking. You can reflect and show courage. The very basis of the environment that we're in and this leading with agility comes with one concept. That concept is, are you comfortable with potentially being a casualty? And are you prepared to be that casualty? And if you're adjusting and pivoting, if you become that casualty, you can adjust and pivot. Adaptive leaders understand that that's what they drive. They're ultimately driving change at the point that they might not need to be of use in their current state, that they have to adjust and pivot as well as the system. And getting always the forefront of the idea of supporting and delighting your customers. And Denning wrote the book Radical Management many, many years ago. It's probably going on 20 years now. It's basically a foundational book for business agility. And adaptive leaders tie into that with this idea of my cycle ties into delighting my customers. And I can delight my customers, self-organized teams, those shorter iterative cycles, value, always learning, because radical transparency is teaching others and enjoying the opportunity to hear where I can do better. And then those deep relationships. And we're going to finish up here now. And I'm going to leave us here with this slide, the emotional intelligence slide. Take a look at this slide. You'll get all these slides in the slide deck itself. A fundamental element of leading with agility is your understanding of the 4 levels of emotional intelligence. And specifically, let's start with number 1. Do you understand yourself? Because very premise of this presentation is leading with agility is about you and your ability to build the belief, to espouse the behaviors that have been talked about here, to begin to change your mental models to deal with that constant disruption. And inside of this presentation are those behaviors, the skill sets, the techniques that can all be blown up. Questions, comments, thoughts? Probably was a little slower than I should have been on some of the elements in this deck. Thoughts, comments, any additional questions? You, leading with agility, you, where are you at as you look at these slides? Where do you want to change? And you have atomic habits that you can look at. You have tiny habits you can look at to start the books that can help you with adjusting and changing some of your models. Where are you at in the growth versus the fixed mindset? Thank you so much for your time. You'll get the slides, you'll get you'll get the slide deck, you'll get the recording. If you need anything, you can contact me. Here's my my LinkedIn. You can find my LinkedIn, and I appreciate your time so much. Have a great rest of your day. Adrian, on the PDU code, we'll send that out with the slide deck. So you'll get that here shortly, probably in a day or 2. Awesome. I do love you all. Thank you for participating. Great session.